live questions come in. The very first question right off the top of the bat, this is always an important one, especially with a cargo ship, is for you, Corentin. What is the estimated SCU capacity for that each variant can carry?
So we have a simple system for that, and the thing is that we take basically 2 tanks. So 2 tanks is the amount of SCU for the cargo variant. So the C2 has a 624 SCU, the M2 has 468 SCU, and the A2 is basically 1/2 of this, so it's 234 SCU.
I do. And of course, when there's almost certainly going to be a lot of stat-related questions because the promotion doesn't begin in full for everybody until May 11th. So we'll do what we can to share what stats we have, but remember, May 11th will be your opportunity to see the full stat sheet, and you'll get all that stuff there. Paul, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the art direction? Now, this is the first ship that we've released in the Crusader Industries line since the Genesis Starliner back in 2015. Coming back to Crusader, when the call was made, we're going to go back to Crusader and do another ship. What were those first considerations you had? You were around. You were part of the team when the Genesis Starliner was developed. Did you have to go back and look at old notes? Did you just start fresh and throw everything away? How did this process begin?
That's a good question. Were there any notes? I'm not quite sure if there were. We've obviously there were a lot of pretty good visuals already for the Starliner, and it's kind of always interesting when you've only got one ship. I don't think we didn't really have any sort of reference for basically where that original artist was coming from, where they were pulling their ideas and inspiration from. So it kind of makes it a little tougher, but in terms of for the concept artist and myself, it's always pretty fresh and interesting. This is a second ship in the line. It's been a long time since the Starliner was done, and it's really just sort of going through, looking at those original images and sort of pulling the key components. I mean, Mike Oberschneider, he's one of our sort of new senior concept artists. Mm-hmm. He's super talented, super strong. So when you're working with a senior, generally there's a lot more give and take. In fact, there's a lot more give. You pick on your key points, sort of profiles that you want to work with. A hump here, an air vent there, a VTOL here, and just some. You pick on those sort of core things that you want to sort of start running with. And then, really it's sort of down to Mike. You give him these sort of a small set of Lego pieces, and then you're like, right, okay, you bring all your own Lego pieces to the party, and let's see what you come up with. So it's very much, you rely on your artists and their artistic strengths just to see what they come up with initially. And so we did loads originally, like in terms of sketches.
I remember.
And really sort of different sort of styles, different configurations, because also it's not just for me, right? It's I'm trying to provide something for Chris, and it's what was in Chris's head. Sometimes we manage to pull it out of his head. Sometimes we just have to sort of go it alone and give it our best shot. And so we we mentioned before, it's always about providing a couple of options, mm-hmm. 2 or 3 options, really quite different ones, and then that will give us a read when we show Chris of like, okay, he's like, oh, I like this double hull, or I like this swan neck, or I like this VTOL, and that gives us that's basically how we just sort of launch, then basically take those initial sketches and then just go into 3D and off we go. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did great. The concept process is super intriguing to me. This is I started counting them before the show and I ran out of time, but I've been a part of 30 of these, at least 30. That's as far as I got before I ran out of these ship launches in my time here, and it's definitely one of the questions is how long does this take and how long does this take? And when you're dealing with a truly artistic process like this, it's sometimes you strike that lightning in a bottle and you hit on that thing that Chris is like, that's it right away, and you're like, wow, this was so easy. And when we do the subscriber vaults, and one of the perks of being a subscriber is you get access to a lot of this imagery for the ships that might have been, and you see some ships that have like just a small handful of them. It's like you caught that lightning in a bottle and you were able to strike it. And then some ships, it's like, here's part 3 of the concept vault, or here's part 3 of all the different versions that we went through before.
Yeah, that's the tough one. Especially when you think you've nailed it, and then Chris is like, no, I don't like this one, which is fine because it's artistic choice, right? I might like something, he might not like it, but we have had it in the past where the things have crashed and burned 3 times in a row, and it's just about how you then sort of how you deal with it, basically. Sometimes an artist will basically hit a brick wall, and then it's really about me stepping in, or sometimes we'll just do a bit of a concept jam, and everyone will just sort of dive in and have a crack at it, just to sort of break through the block, just come up with some alternative theories. Sometimes it's the functionality can often define the shape of the ship, and when it's a new ship, it's like something we haven't dealt with before, you can go in multiple different directions, and that can lead to quite different configurations.
Yeah. There were quite a few different configurations for the Starlifter through its design. It'll be interesting to see those when they eventually make them to the subscriber vault. Matthew, we've got some Hurricane questions coming in. Where is it there? Will the Hurricane be able to cool its weapons after sustained fire as quickly or more quickly than other ships with just a standard turret? Because now the Hurricane turret is unique because it's got 4 size 3 guns. So does that generate more heat than normal? Does the Hurricane have a system that's designed to compensate for that?
It doesn't have anything where it's a bespoke system. Just its component default loadout is going to be really tuned for that. So it's the kind of thing where if you're trying to run all 6 guns on the Hurricane, so the 4 turret guns and the 2 pilot nose guns all simultaneously, that's going to choke you out on power and heat throughput.
With the default components.
Yeah, with everything default, everything stock. But if you're really doing it where the pilot is flying the ship and the turret gunner is really the one doing all the heavy shooting, it's going to have enough cooling to hold up with that throughput. So there'll still be a few pauses. I think right now, though, it can shoot for about a minute or so.
A minute of sustained fire.
Yeah, when you set it to the staggered fire that man turrets have access to right now, it just can keep shooting and shooting and shooting, and it takes a while to actually choke out the power of the cooling on it.
Cool. All right, another stats question, Corentin. You got your cheat sheet? What is the expected min-max crew size to operate the Hercules?
So it goes from 2, which is basically like on the Starfarer or any cargo ship, which is pilot, co-pilot, to 3 for the M2, which is basically another seat in the cockpit. And then we get into the A2, which is a lot, where it's 8 seats total. And then you add 1 other guy for the bomb bay at the rear, which is pretty cool. Like there's a stations in between the bombs at the back, so it's a cool visual. But obviously, like some players might want to solo it, and technically they can't fly it solo, but don't expect to fire any guns outside of the main guns if you're just alone.
Gotcha. Now, before we keep going, I've noticed that we're obviously getting a lot of questions about bombing gameplay. Obviously, bombing is a new game system, or a relatively new game system, for Star Citizen. As it is its own system, it's a weapon system, it's a game system of itself. The development of the bombing system is done separately from the ship design team. So we're not going to take any bomb questions today because we don't have the system designer. I'm already trained. We don't have the system designer on the show today that can answer those questions. But like we do with every concept sale, we will be doing a Q&A post once the ship promotion has started, they'll be replaced. Put your bomb questions in there, and we'll make sure it gets to the right people, and we'll get the answers for you. It's just we're not able to address those today, because even with 3 wonderful people, we don't have the personnel on necessary to do that. So a question that you can answer, Corentin: will the gunship variant still fit a tank?
Yes. So that's the thing that we wanted from the start, is that the Starlifter was built for 2 tanks. It was the main design point. And when we went onto making the gunship variant, it was like, oh, well, that takes a lot of place, but it's still an Hercules and it must fit a tank inside. So there's always space for a tank at the front, unless you fit a cargo, some cargo or some cyclones or whatever at the front. But yeah.
So that makes me think of a follow-up question. So one of the interesting features of the Hercules is that it's got cargo doors in the front and the back.
Yep.
So the gunship variant, can you still drive a tank through, or how is that lined up inside? Does that prevent?
So,
except from the rear?
You need to go from the front.
Okay.
The back is entirely just for the bomb system. Maybe Paul can explain the choice for the two arms and stuff like this, but it's basically like it's easier, obviously, in terms of design. Like you can enter from one point or another, but also like if you decide to put some cargo at the rear, for example, for a regular variant, obviously, well, you can't enter your vehicle from the rear and just push the cargo to the front or whatever. So it just makes sense.
It's the sort of roll on, roll off kind of theory, isn't it? It's like the ferry. It's just for once we're trying to make it easy. You load up your tanks, go in, load quick, and quickly sort of offload basically. So it's that was the thinking originally. Try and make sense for once.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot better these days.
Well, it's you can probably quote me as saying a lot of things over the last couple of years, but one of the things I say most commonly is that we get better at this the more we go along. This is game development. We are learning how to make these ships. We are learning how to make them better and more effective with every ship going forward. It's one of the things I tell folks who are very anxious about the Carrack. I'm like the weight is probably the best thing that could possibly happen for that ship. Let us figure all this stuff out, before we get to building your ship, and you'll get a much better ship for it. The other thing I think about, and this is just me, I'm off the script here. Well, the second I heard that you had the cargo doors that open at both ends, I started to think about the Daymar Rally. The backer organized race on the surface of Daymar, and just dropping a bunch of Starlifters and using them as race markers, where you have to drive in and drive out.
And why drop them? Have them keep moving. You make it an even bigger challenge then, where it's like, all right, you have to find a way to fly through the gunship version, where it's like, don't blow your ass up on the bombs, and still make it through. Thread the needle.
I like it. Sounds good.
Matthew, is the Hurricane considered as a long-range fighter? Does it have bigger fuel tanks, or is it more along the range of the Hornet or the Sabre?
Expected to be around the same operational range as the Hornet and the Sabre. So it's not on its own built as like a super long-range type ship. It's very much a sort of on-roll, on-mission type craft.
Now, Corentin, in the concept art that we revealed in the ship shape segment, we saw a lot. We saw Nova tanks, and we saw Cyclones. Are there other vehicles that can be stored inside the Starlifter? Can we securely park like a parasite craft, like a Merlin or an Archimedes? What are our options here?
So technically, anything smaller than a tank can fit inside. So that's a good thing about the tank, is that it's massive, so you can put like many different ships inside. So we made some small list about what could fit relatively easily. Easily. I've seen people put ships in ships that shouldn't fit, but they fit. So technically, obviously all the ground vehicles. You can put an Argo, P-52, Razor, 85X, M50, and technically the Aurora series as well if you're good. Like it's a bit longer, but should fit. So yeah, basically every ship that is relatively small, you can't fit in. If it gets a bit bigger, like with wings, it might get a bit tough because it's mostly, well, getting through the doors.
Gotcha. Now, our own Tyler Nolan has been trying to pitch me on a new show called Will It Fit? Where it's a show just where we sit there and try to put ships in ships. I suggested calling it Ship and Ship, but it's not happening, guys. I just want to give Tyler Nolan a shout out for an idea.
And won't that cannibalize too many of our, our community streamers content?
Yeah, they do a stellar job of it enough as it is. Yeah. And honestly, there are points where I would have given up. Like, oh, that doesn't fit. And then I wish we had a lab coat. All right, what else do we got here? As far as the variants, we've got the military variant, Corentin. Does the mil-spec variant have a noticeable armor difference from the cargo version?
Yeah, so basically it's a bit like the difference between the Starfarer and the Starfarer Gemini. The civilian variant of the Starlifter is medium armor, but the other one, military on gunship, is heavy armor. So you will feel the difference. It has more guns, but also more armor. So it's not just like one more gun on a bit less cargo. It's a ship for, well, if you have some ships attacking you, you will still be able to defend yourself longer than a civilian variant.
Okay. Paul, what's your favorite aspect about the design of this ship?
Oh, that's a tough one. Are we talking visuals?
Yes.
Like, are we?
Yeah, your favorite visual, Carl. What was the get for this ship? What were the point where you're like, yes, I really like that, and I'm glad Chris said yes.
That is a good question. Do you know what? I think Mike did a really stellar job of a couple of views, a couple of sheets that he put together, just sort of cell sheets, and he did like a really sort of, it was a top-down view, just looking at the ship, and then it was sort of like a widescreen format, and then it was very sort of graphic design. Then he'd got a tank facing it, and it just looked like a really iconic shape. And also I think when the rear of this ship sort of, when you see this ship flying and you're going to be in that sort of camera position, sort of looking behind and slightly down on it, it just has a really good vibe about it. Everything just works. All the lines are really good. And I think it was that, it was hitting all the key beats as well. Me, want to see my box ticked, like, here's the things we've got to get in it. And so, I was constantly just going to Mike, where's the hump? Where's the hump? Just, show me the hump. Like, where's the, on the front and the swan neck, and then leading up to the sort of the rear sort of spoiler, essentially. So I was just I was just constantly pushing him to get this sort of long curvature going. So he kept trying to do it as a straight line. I was like, no, just put the curves in. The curves have got to go back in.
I don't know why. It's just my upbringing, but you're saying that, and all I'm picturing is Igor and Young Frankenstein going, "What hump?" I forgot my question. Matthew, question about the Hurricane here. So we know it has 4 size 3 guns on the turret. Will we be able to remove the 4 size 3 and hook up maybe 2 size 5s?
No. The turret is just the 4 size 3 guns. Now, if on the infinite timeline of things, if we ever offer any swaps for the man turret housing, who knows? But in terms of what mounts the ship has, it is 4 fully separate size 3 mounts on that turret, so you wouldn't be changing any of the sizes for it.
Gotcha. Follow-up question related to the turret. I've seen some questions here about your comment that the Hurricane is a cap ship killer, not necessarily a cap ship killer, but a good option for assaulting capital ships.
In a wing of them, yeah. So one thing just to sort of squash with that is don't expect to be taking a single Hurricane and taking on an Idris by yourself in it. That's no. Even yesterday on ATV, the description was, okay, if you have a wing of Hurricanes, because you bring 5 Hurricanes to a fight, okay, now you've got 20 guns that can focus on target, firing perpendicular to the flight path of their ship. where a dedicated fighter, it's like, well, no, I'm basically focusing in this front 30-degree arc of my ship, so the Hurricane has just a hell of a lot better coverage range on it.
Yeah, I think that's one. I saw a lot of people, comparing it to the Sabre or other ships that have size 3 guns. Like, well, why wouldn't they just be as effective? And I think you really spoke to it there. Whereas with the Sabre, something, they got to come at you and then go away, and come at you and go away.
Yeah.
The Hurricane, because its size 3s are on that turret, can come right alongside you and just strafe the ever-loving.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can just keep that fire up, because then, your target's running in a straight line. Well, okay, I'm going to just fly parallel to you, and my guns are able to stay on target the whole time versus any other ship in that same size. So it's like, the Sabre, no, it wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, you could technically decouple, but then you're going to be fighting against red out, black out for how fast you're moving to try and maintain pace with the other ship. There'll be enough just complications to it where it's like, well, yeah, you could do that or try to do that, or you could just have a Hurricane flying parallel and shooting perpendicular and just blasting your target.
I made the joke in Ship Shape that you don't want to get in front of the Hurricane. I think you just don't want to be anywhere near it unless you're in the cockpit.
Don't be in the top hemisphere of the Hurricane.
We've got a couple questions in the chat and in the Spectrum thread about the Starlifter variant of the Starliner. Now, for those who might not have been around in 2015, when the Genesis Starliner, which was the very first ship from Crusader Industries, was first introduced back in 2015, in the lore text, in the flavor text, we mentioned 2 possible variants, or 2 variants that existed in the lore of the universe: the Starlifter and the Star Hunter. If I remember, the Starlifter, the Star Seeker, and the Star Hunter. Actually, 3 variants. And people are asking, is this that ship? This is a different ship. Basically, it's one of those things where we had an idea in 2015. If we ever pursued variants, we would do that. But of course, over the course of 3 years of development, we wanted to, the decision was made to just design a bespoke ship instead of trying to make it a variant of the Starliner, and I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, the look and feel of this ship is quickly becoming. It hasn't even been 24 hours yet, but it's quickly becoming a community favorite, and that's a thing that you can only accomplish by making it a separate ship. So there is no more plans for a Starlifter variant of the Starliner, which is what the question here is about. That's off the board. As for the Star Seeker or the Star Hunter, who knows? The Starfarer Gemini was one of those lore variants. When the Starfarer was first introduced, there was no plans to actually put the Gemini in the game. That was a lore variant. It's one of those things we like to know exists out in the universe, in the history of the universe. And then a couple of years passed, and when it came time, like, we need this thing, it's people like, oh, let's do that. Instead of we've got that in the lore, let's develop that. So who knows what the future will hold as far as the Star Seeker or the Star Hunter. But the Starlifter is now its own bespoke ship. It's the Hercules Starlifter from Crusader Industries, as it were. Let's see, Corentin, another stats question. How many weapons and what size?
So, well, there's a lot of weapons.
Yeah.
So, let's start from the easy one, from the civilian variant. Each variant basically has 2 size 4 fixed ballistic cannons. At the front, it's basically just a bit behind the cockpit. They are deployable guns like this. Then you got 2 remote turrets, size 3 guns on the remote turrets, one covering the rear of the ship, which is pretty good on one that is at the bottom of the ship. So even if you land the ship, technically you will still have quite a good view, because the cargo bay is pretty high up, so the feet are pretty high up as well. So even if you deploy the ramps as well, both ramps at the same time, you can cover a big range around it. For the military variant, it's easy. Basically, you add a remote turret, same size 3 guns under the nose, so it's more power at the front. On the gunship, well, it's where it becomes a bit complicated. Same thing as the military variant, but on top of that, you add 2 size 4 ballistic Gatlings, which are on the side towards the front, on 2 size 5 remote side ballistic cannons, which are basically same thing on the side, but a bit behind or a bit further. It's basically It's the same. And obviously, you got the bomb system, which is brand new, and you got either 4 size 10 bombs, which are really big. Like I think there's been a picture of Paul looking at his screen with the nice concept art of those bombs. And we got what was made for cluster bombing as well, which is about 60 size 3 bombs. So there's a big size difference, but there's a big number difference as well. So it's quite a bit.
Right. So basically what I'm hearing today is don't be above a hurricane and don't be below a Hercules. and by all means don't be sandwiched between them. So
Actually, no, between them might be the
your-
only safe spot because
sure.
it's like, oh, you're in between the belly of a hurricane and the top panel of a Starlifter. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, if you move, you'll die, but if you can hold right there and not do anything, you might not die as fast.
Paul, I'm seeing some questions about the interior of the Hercules. What can you tell us about the interior? I don't know how fleshed out that is. What you got for me?
Yeah, I mean, it's, given the time constraints, that's the usual caveat. We've tried to address everything that's generally expected in these ships, so if there's accommodation, if there's a bed, etc., there has to be some kind of food station, there has to be a toilet, toilet's super important. But this has been a new interior for us, so new style, but it's pretty, as far as I'm aware, it's pretty much figured out as best we can. So, in terms of the cargo space, access to the upper, upper sections, the rear remote gunners, the pods, habitation section, airlock, and the front cockpit. We've done our best basically to factor in everything that's required.
Yeah.
So.
This is generally one of those things that's handled. If you follow ship shape and you follow the pipeline, you'll notice there's the concept stage is stage 2, but then there's gray box and white box, and a lot of the interior stuff of ships are really fleshed out in the gray box and in white box stage. So I was just curious what we knew at this point.
So the thing that is nice is that we got 2 floors since it's you got a nice lift as well going from top floor, cargo bay, and even outside. We got 2 beds as well. So
Yep.
we got the basics. It's good.
Interesting question about the cargo doors. Are they both the same size? Is one bigger than the other one?
The cargo doors or the cargo opening?
Yeah, the cargo opening. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they should be the same size.
Okay. So
They should be. I mean, I actually haven't, physically measured it in.
Taking your ruler.
Yeah. But theoretically, yes. I mean, it would be crazy if they weren't.
Yeah,
right?
they don't open exactly the same way, but they are about the same size. Yeah.
How do they open, Corentin?
So at the nose, it's basically like it's two doors
It's
opening,
kind of
and then there's
butterflies
a
out.
ramp. Yeah, and then at the rear, it's more a bit more classic, I'd say, where it just falls down.
Yeah.
And then extends as well because it's like a bit on the Hydroids when we've shown like the ramp extending. It's the same thing. It's high up, so the ramp will have to get longer.
I see a couple questions here asking if it would be possible, and this is one of those questions I'm gonna preface by saying you're gonna be the ones who tell us whether this is possible when the time comes. But can you open both doors and treat the cargo bay like a landing bay? If you're in space and somebody fly in and land inside a Hercules?
If the pilot is good, yeah.
I was gonna say, it's like, regardless of whether we say you can or you can't, it's when it comes time to put this in the game, there are going to be a dozen videos in the first 3 hours of people attempting to do this. So like I said, that's one of those things where you tell us whether it's possible or not. A lot of questions about parachutes and wanting to know if you can deploy tanks and cyclones via parachute out of a Hercules. I'm going to say it's a little too early to say, and to save that question for something like the Q&A. When the Q&A may still be too early to say at that point, but you can try again there. We're not going to have an answer for you today, but you can try again in the Q&A with no promises that there'll be an answer for it there either. Let's see, what else do we got? Matthew,
Uh-oh.
does the Hurricane turret gunner have an ejection seat?
It technically has the ejection handle on the seat. I actually have to recheck for how we deal with people in manned turrets quickly evacuating from a ship. So like it has the geo and the interaction to support that. It's just, do we actually blast the canopies, which I do not
Or
know,
maybe
actually.
shoot it out down below?
You wouldn't want that. Well, just because the actual housing that you go into the turret for, it's not a full cylindrical tube. It's actually more rectangular fit to the seat. And so if we just pushed you straight down, regardless of which way you were facing, there's a chance that you will end up eating your kneecaps down to your ankles and die just as painfully.
That sounds so bad.
You
All
would
right.
say that.
So we know the Starlifter can carry a number of vehicles. Are there any vehicle maintenance facilities on board the Starlifter for these vehicles?
Nope. It's a full transport ship, but not a repair ship. We got some repair ships for that, and that's it all.
Okay. All right. Can the gunship variant use torpedoes instead of bombs?
In the same way, nope. It's made just for bombs, and it would have needed to be designed differently if we wanted to fit torpedoes inside. So
Yeah.
there's other ships designed for this, like the Polaris, for example, but not this one.
It's a very common sentiment with all of our ships. All of our ships are somebody's favorite. Even something that's terrible like the Carrack. But everybody, when you have your favorite ship, when you fall in love with the design, with the look and feel of a ship, there's this natural inclination to want it to do everything. It's human nature. It's perfectly normal. We've been seeing some variation of this, since the project began. I love that ship. Can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do this? It's like, no, that's not what that ship's
Make a
supposed
variant
to do.
so it does that. Well,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, it's perfectly natural. But we're building a game in a rich universe with all kinds of ships to complete all manner of purposes and whatnot. And you don't want one ship that can just.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the expected range of the Starlifter?
So that's a good question, because as usual for concepts, well, it will change when we go to the balancing part and stuff like this. But it's similar to other hulls, other ships of the same size. So it's a transporter ship, so it's a bit like the Caterpillar, for example, or a bit like the Starfire. So we made recently a post about fuel changes and stuff like this. So it should be like other transport ship. It should be able to refuel in space. So itself, I mean, so it should have a good range, because this is a transport ship in the first place.
Nice. Speaking of, to follow up on the transport ship, one of the questions in the chat is, since this can transport, two tanks, does the ship have crew facilities for the additional crew of the ships that it's transporting?
So no, that's not the case. We have some basic facilities in the cockpit, but it's just for the crew of the Starlifter. The thing is that, well, we wanted it to be a full transport ship where you go from one planet to another planet, or from a system to another system, this kind of stuff. But it's not something like the Hydris, for example, or some ships that are really, we have like a lot of crew and they are there. They can live there in space for a long time. It's not the case.
It's an important distinction. The Idris is meant to be your living mobile base. The ships that sit in the hangar bay are meant to be a part of the complement of the Idris. You're supposed to fly around. The Hurricane is, let's get these tanks, let's get these Cyclones, let's get these Auroras, whatever, from A to B. It's like it's like ride in the tank. I think it would be cool to ride in the tank and just to look out and open the door.
Well, only if you're riding with Rampage Jackson, Liam Neeson, and Bradley Cooper. Only in that explicit scenario.
I will always.
And you have to be Charlton Copley.
I mean, it's going to be like.
I'm not saying it's a
It's not
bad
a
thing.
bad
I'm just saying it's a matter of fact thing.
That's true. I like to think I'm the general, but I'm in reality I'm probably more like the Murdoch. Yeah. That's a sobering realization. Man, I just got owned by Matt Sherman here. I'm not face. I'm not the. No. All right, okay, sorry. What else we got? Let's go back from the live chat, though. Again, folks, we are unable to address any bombing questions or bombing-related questions here on the show today. The bombing system has been worked on by a different systems designer, and they're not here on the show. So you should submit your bombing questions when the time comes. Once the promotion for the Starlifter goes live on May 11th, there will be the standard Q&A post, just like there always is. We encourage you to submit your questions there, and we'll attempt to, as we always do, to address as many of them as possible. But that's your place for that. Let's see. What else do we got here? Let's do another hurricane question. Matthew, what are the weak spots that you were talking about on the hurricane?
Basically the belly of the ship. Just because the turret is covering the top hemisphere of the ship, so you've got full 360 rotational clearance around the turret. You can go 90 degrees up with it, so you get this half sphere of coverage. But on the bottom of the ship, there's not really anything. So that's definitely going to be its weakest spot. So you don't want to expose the stomach to anything. So.
Paul, here's an interesting question. This is the first Crusader Industries ship that we've seen since the Starliner. Now I know the Starliner is not on the schedule for 2018. But do you have have you given any early thoughts about what the development of the Starlifter might mean for the look and feel of the Starliner?
I mean, we've given it fleeting thoughts.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'll turn up on the horizon at some point. And I guess it'll just be a natural sort of progression. Basically, we'll take what was done in those early days, and we'll probably just do a little bit of a nip and a tuck. It'll just be a slight, slight altering of some of the lines, and just bringing it a little closer to what's been done on the Starlifter. And it's not, they're not a million miles away, so I'm not too worried. They are quite different craft, so I would expect that there is going to be some, they're not going to be a one for one, but there's going to be, it'll be it's like a family, isn't it? Basically, not everybody looks the same, but there's a resemblance basically that runs through the family, and we'll just be, feeding that into it when we get onto it.
You make an interesting point there. Whenever we reveal a new ship, in fact, I'm going to use the Vulcan because it's the most recent example of this I can think of. There are always. It's interesting to see the community expectations about what looks like an Anvil ship and what looks like an Aegis ship and what looks like this ship. Anytime a ship is green, like it doesn't even matter what shape or whatever. We see a glutton of that looks like an Anvil ship. Why is it green? I got into an interesting conversation with somebody who was telling me that the Vulcan didn't look anything like an Aegis ship. It looks more like the Reclaimer. At which point I just had to be like, the Reclaimer is Aegis. But we see in the
interesting one.
Yeah, we see in the real world that manufacturers go through, a plethora of design choices. Some of our companies in our game have been around in fiction for hundreds of years. So it stands to reason that over those hundreds of years, they would have had different art directors, come through the company and with different art, with different styles, and want during like an Anvil ship at this era might look like this, but an Anvil ship from an era just 20 years later might look, completely different. We see that in the Ford Mustang, and how many revisions that goes through. And then,
some manufacturers are definitely have a sort of a more pure sort of lineage, let's say, and especially the sort of like there was more variance in the design language in the earlier stuff. And now there's a stronger push for that those core family features to run through. And it's kind of like you mentioned the Mustang or say Porsche or whatever. You can see that progression for over 100 years, something like that. But ideally, you want to see similar sort of lines. But where it gets tricky, interesting, it's when you go into different divisions, essentially, you're going from, say, a passenger line, or you're going from a passenger vehicle, or to something industrial. Then that's when it starts getting tricky. Like, okay, well, what do we take with us? You've got the badge, and maybe you've got the grill, and then you can go either way, basically. And I think the sort of the Reclaimer and the Vulcan, that's why I sort of call industrial ages. I personally, they're probably more Anvil to me than anything, possibly. I mean, it's if you tightened up some of the radiuses on the geometry, then it's kind of, they're sort of a bit of a hybrid.
You also see things in the real world where when a particular design captures the imagination of the populace, you see other companies and other designers begin to add influences of that into their own designs. So I think some of that comes into play sometimes. With our own ships, it's like for instance, when we revealed the silhouette of the Origin 100, there were people trying to make it out to be a Carrack. And even though the silhouette was missing all of the antenna, and other people were still like, "No, look, it's got a wing with whatever those things are at the corner, and those things mean Carrack." And it's like, well, no, it doesn't. That's a minor feature, but it's been an internal source of interest and curiosity for me. The things that people latch on to and say, this is this and this is this, and how they have to be 100% separate, and how no company can influence another company, and these companies that have been around for 40 years can't go through different phases and have multiple looks, like industrial Aegis versus something like military Aegis, for the Idris and stuff, and then things like the Saber, which is just sexy as all hell.
I still think it'd be weird if we made a sexy Drake.
Even on the Aegis stuff, we've sort of gone from softer lines, the Avenger, the Retaliator, that sort of stuff, to the sort of theoretically newer ships in the timeline, and they've gone slightly sharper. But yeah, it's interesting. It's it's a constant struggle, challenge, basically. It's how do you achieve all the looks of these ships, keep the family history, but still progress them, keep them fresh. There are times when we've gone, I've gone really safe on a design, and Chris has just crushed it and just said, no, that's just way too boring, or way too ugly, and we just had to go back to the drawing board. But it's all, you always, second bite at the cherry, you always come up with something a lot better. So
yeah, I call that personality in ships. You want ships to have a personality. And Chris liking personality is the only thing that's saved my butt over the last 3 years. All right, back to the Starlifter design questions, Corentin. We talked about the ships that it can carry, the tanks and the Cyclones. We said that the gunship can still fit one tank. What about the military variant? We know the cargo can do 2 tanks. We know the gunship can do 1 tank. What can the military variant carry?
So military variant can't carry the same as the civilian variant, just less cargo. Basically, it's due to heavier armor, more guns, and a bit some other differences where basically it's heavier, so it can't transport as much cargo. You can still fit 2 tanks, but basically you can stack less cargo than the civilian variant.
Gotcha.
So it's the same otherwise. Like if you got some ships or whatever, if it fits, it sits.
Gotcha. So still room for 2 tanks, and a very heavily armored cargo hauler. You know, it's I like that. You've got the whole series, which can easily carry the most cargo, but it's exposed and more a danger. You've got smaller ships like the Freelancer or whatever to get you started with cargo hauling, whatever. But the Hercules, the Hercules is going to be a very attractive option for folks that are looking for long range cargo hauling, I think. What can you tell us about the speed and maneuverability of the Hercules? I can't imagine this thing's going to be zipping around like a saber.
So yeah, obviously this is a big ship, so it can't really do dogfights or whatever. But there's two things. So for the speed, it's about something in between a Starfarer and a Caterpillar in terms of speed. So it's around 130 meters per second. The maneuverability, obviously, well, it will go down to balancing again later on. But this is a ship that has been thought to be better in atmosphere than other ships its size. While outside of ships that are dedicated for something else, like the 600i or whatever. But if you put like a Starlifter versus a Starfarer or an Hammerhead in atmosphere of a planet, the Starlifter will be way better than other ships.
Gotcha.
Like this.
All right, let's see if we can do. We have time for one more question. Let's see. Let's see if we can find one more question that we haven't. A lot of these questions are are either similar to ones we answered before, or you guys just covered it. Like there's a Starflare multi-floor to single floor. You already revealed that it's got 2 floors. How about the weapons on the Hercules? Is it all ballistics, or are there any energy weapons on the ship?
So on the gunship, yeah, the side guns on the side are ballistic. The front ones on every ship are ballistic as well, but the small turrets, the size 3 turrets, are all laser on every variant of the ship. So the small turrets, yeah, are just laser. They are, like most ships, just remote point defense turret.
All right. Well, that's it, gentlemen. That wraps up this week's show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Friday. I know it's at the end of your work week, guys. I always feel like a bit of a heel. I'm like, I know you're ready to go home at the end of your work week, but would you please just stay an extra hour and answer questions live?
Let's get the most pop.
Yeah, you're at the beginning of your day. I don't care about you. But
Yeah,
these guys, though, these guys stay at the end of their week, later. So I do appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show. Remember, everybody, the Hercules Starlifter promotion starts for everybody on May 11th. So that's where you'll find the full stats and all the sales information, and you can find all that and check all that out. Then we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll do the wrap up. Stay tuned.